Congress will vote on a budget resolution that could pave the way for President Trump's vision. Speaker Mike Johnson trying to push that one big, beautiful bill forward with over $4 trillion in tax breaks and $2 trillion in cuts. But he does face stiff opposition from Democrats and even some pushback from his own party. For more on what we can expect today, we are joined by Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George, who is live on Capitol Hill. And Joe, it's a big moment for Speaker Johnson, probably the biggest since that speaker vote we saw earlier this year. There is some dissension, it seems, among Republicans in what is a razor-thin majority for them in the House. Why does what's happening on Capitol Hill today potentially matter to those watching at home?
Yeah, Andrew, I'm glad you brought up the why here, because I think it's important for our viewers streaming along with us here on Scripps News to understand why a budget resolution vote matters. I get it. If you hear that pop up on your TV, it sounds a little boring. It sounds a little wonky. It sounds a little inside Washington. Think of a budget resolution vote happening today as just the key first step for President Trump's agenda. If you're somebody who voted for President Trump, or maybe you didn't vote for him, but you're certainly following some of his policy ideas like no taxes on tips for service workers, a campaign promise to reduce taxes for those on Social Security. These are big ticket items that impact millions of Americans. Well, President Trump can't do that through executive action. He needs the House. He needs the Senate to send, as you said, Andrew, as the president likes to say, one big, beautiful bill to him. And that's important here. The strategy that conservatives are taking, at least for now, is we're not going to get an immigration bill and then an energy bill and then a tax bill. We're going to get one big bill, and this budget resolution vote is the first key step to achieving that one big bill. Now, even though Republicans control the House and control the Senate, it is very difficult, even with one-party control, to pass consequential, large pieces of legislation, ultimately like this. There's internal divisions that can creep up. For many Republicans, it's a debate over what to cut, how much to cut. You have some fiscal conservatives who say if we're going to be enacting major policies like Trump tax cut changes, that needs to be offset with cuts to government spending elsewhere. You have some more moderate conservatives who are saying we like the idea of cuts, but we better not be looking at Medicaid because my phones are ringing off the hook. Town halls have gotten more a ruckus in recent days. So there's internal division amongst the Republican conference. And meanwhile, you have Democrats who aren't going to be cooperating with this. In fact, quite the opposite. They've scheduled a rally, protest press conference, if you will, outside the U.S. Capitol around the lunch hour today, protesting this Republican budget resolution vote today. Yesterday, Speaker Johnson spoke about this to reporters on Capitol Hill. He remains optimistic that he has the votes. Take a listen.
Everybody needs to understand the resolution is merely the starting point for the process. So there's nothing specific about Medicaid in the resolution. The legislation comes later. So this is the important first start. We believe we'll have the votes. I've got a handful of people to talk to about various issues tonight. But we're moving forward. We're very optimistic we'll get this thing done.
We will see if Speaker Johnson ultimately has the votes. He has said that before and not had the votes. Should be a very busy day, Andrew Rafferty, here in the halls of the United States Capitol.
Yeah, and maybe some more evidence is the fact that we saw the Senate last week pass more incremental legislation as sort of a backup to make sure some of Donald Trump's agenda is potentially passed if this effort in the House ultimately does not pan out. And of course, this all, Joe, is not happening in a vacuum. The context here is there's also a government funding deadline happening in the middle of next month. Stop me if you heard this one before. But where do things stand for people watching at home who want to know if the government's going to shut down, or is this a classic case of we talk about it for a couple weeks and then there's an 11th hour deal?
Well, I know you're no fan of a countdown to shutdown clock, and we're not launching one right now, but there is a funding deadline, right? The government runs out of money in 17 days. And usually what happens in recent years is that Democrats and Republicans come together for a brief kumbaya moment, and they say, hey, let's put aside our differences and at least keep the government open. I think the big political question here over the course of these next few weeks is, do Democrats abandon their kumbaya tendencies and stand up to President Trump because of various cuts? There is a desire by some progressives to say, hey, we can't be going along with this while federal workers are getting fired and there's threats to disavow the Department of Education. So it's what is going to make this funding fight, which will play out throughout early March, mid-March, I think so interesting. Obviously, our Scripps News Group team here on Capitol Hill, led by congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed and Sam Lisker, will be keeping us up to date every step of the way, Andrew.
As will Joe St. George every morning here on Scripps News. Don't sell yourself short. Our deputy.
I'm here too. Yeah, thanks for the plug. Thank you, sir.
Our Deputy Political Director, Joe St. George, for us, bringing us all the latest on that funding battle on Capitol Hill. Joe, thank you.